The package block auction has excellent price discovery and handles complex bidder preference involving substitutes and compromise. The package block auction does well on both efficiency and revenue grounds. Auction achieves several purposes. An auction can not only raise revenue for the government, but also generate an efficient allocation, that is, assign the license to the firm able to make the best use of them. The government can also design the rules of auction to address various policy goals, such as avoiding monopoly and directing license to minority-owned firms. In addition, the results of an auction can provide policy makers with useful information. An auction, therefore, is not just about raising money. An auction reveals information how valuable the bidders believe their resources to be and which bidder value it the most. India's expanding economy has exerted enormous pressure on its natural resource, often leading to its unethical exploitation, which has resulted in violent clashes in tribal belts. The Honorable Supreme Court, while rendering its judgment in 2G case, observed that a first-come, first-served process to allocate natural resource was unconstitutional because it violated the principles of equal opportunity. The court further said that by transferring or alienating natural resource, the state is duty-bound to adopt the method of auction. For the government, the order of the Supreme Court means an end to the policy of discretion, which neither the politician nor the brokerates are able to digest. Now the rule of the game is, when the government gives away public assets for private or commercial use, it must follow three principles, namely transparency, equal opportunity to all who are interested in acquiring the said assets, and the protection of the public interest. Only the mechanism of auction could ensure this. The mining of coal ferrous metal is governed by archaic legislation. It does not enable auction at all. The Coal Nationalization Act made Coal India, the public sector giant, a monopoly power over coal mining. An amendment to the Coal Nationalization Act permitted the private players to mine, but investigation both by the CBI and CAG would reveal that the government gave away about 49 million tons of coal preserved to PSUs and the private companies for a pittance without auction between 2006 to 2009. The other day there was a report in the press that the CAG has estimated a rupee 10.6 lakh crore loss to the exchequer on account of allotment of coal blocks during 2004-2009 without auction to 100 private and public sector companies. The CAG office has estimated a windfall gain of rupees 6.31 lakh crores to both private and public sector companies.
Thank you, Mr. Shekhar.
I'll just dwell on the last subject, that is on the... I'll just briefly. My learned friend referred to the Goa experience, but there is one aspect on which I would like to dwell, that is on the point of intergenerational equity, in which I feel that something needs to be said, and that is
I think the point, Mr. Shekhar, for example, is that it is only high value, recognized high value natural assets, resources that must be auctioned. That's how I heard you say that the high value, once it has been achieved, is something which for which auction. I think we are all agreed on that. So perhaps we can move on to the next speaker.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
I request Mr. Sachdeva.
Good morning, all of you. I think this is the most important topic that will decide the destiny of our country in the future as to how we face these issues. Let me first refer to intergenerational equity. Now, we have all talked about intergenerational equity. There is also intragenerational equity. So there are 1.3 billion people in this country. A lot of them are poor and have no access to oil, gas, and other kinds of resources. So they have to be kept in view, because when we talk about per capita consumption, India's per capita consumption is low, the rich are actually hiding behind the poor, because the poor people in India consume very little. Now, let me just talk about this public auction and the other points. Now, in recent times, the nature of the corruption scandals that we have seen are all related to loss of revenue. For example, the coal scam that we talked about, or the 2G spectrum. Earlier, it used to be in the expenditure for the procurement. Why is this happening? This is happening precisely because natural resources are being allocated for private commercial exploitation. The scarce resources, without exchequer getting its due, without the government getting its royalty. Because we have to keep in mind that all the resources belong to the people of this country. The profits of it cannot be privatized, cannot be entirely privatized. You can have a small incentive for the private operators. So why are some corporations like Reliance, why have they become abnormally rich? Because if tomorrow I start a business, in normal business the profit is 10%, 15%. But in the natural resources, where these mega corporations like Vedanta, Reliance, Kane are all operating, there the profit is 80%, 90%, 400%. So, the Santosh Hegde report regarding Karnataka mining use of Lokayukta, I think that should be mandatory reading because firstly he talks about the economics of mining. He says that 80% is profit, 10% is expenditure on transportation, 10% on extraction, the government gets 1% royalty, so 80% is taken as profit, and most of the ore is exported, iron ore is exported. So he has talked about intergenerational equity because in Karnataka the resources are 1 billion, so if you extract 100 million in a year, so in 10 years, you are done away with your iron ore, forget about the next generation, even this generation would not have the benefit of iron ore. He has also talked about that 11,000 square kilometers of forest land was de-reserved when our current foreign minister was the chief minister. So that in itself is a huge scandal. He has given an entire chapter on the collapse of the administration. Now, why does this happen? That the forest department, the police department, customs, excise, all kinds of departments in the state government collapse at the same resource, and it belongs to the people. So the government policy that it has to be given at this price has to prevail, and Anil B cannot get it at a lower price. But immediately after he won, he writes to the government, though I have a contract with you that I will give it at a particular price till 2020, but now I want to increase the price. And then the editorials start coming in, for example, in the Indian Express that, oh, yes, gas price should be increased. And the Prime Minister makes a speech that we are considering revision of gas prices. Then there is people talk about that we should appoint an independent regulator for fixing gas prices. Now, this is all a charade just to get away from that contract and increase the gas price. Now, in the 2G case, I think all the arguments that are discussed here about auction and vis-a-vis non-auction were discussed in great detail, and two of the best judges of the Supreme Court, Justice Reddy and Justice Ganguly, went through and they said as far as scarce natural resources are concerned, you cannot but have auction. Mr. Shekhar has already given about all the arguments in favor of auction, affordability, efficiency, everything. Now, let me just also extend this to other, apart from natural resources, even the natural monopolies need to be auctioned. For example, highways, roadways, airports, these are all natural monopolies, metro. So if you give it away to anybody, then there's a room for example, in this airport, while airport was auctioned, but nobody knew that after you get the bid and you win the bid, you can levy an airport development fee on all passengers. So anybody traveling to and from Delhi and Mumbai have to pay an airport development fee. That was struck down by the Supreme Court. Now the government is bringing in rules to allow that fee to be retained by all these operators and to charge. Now let me just come to the last point that I want to make about the economic instability that was made. For example, in Nigeria, they talk about the curse of oil. And in India also, because of these exploitation of natural resources, you have a huge tribal discontent, you have the Maoist problem, and these are all linked. If we read the Justice Sudarshan Reddy's judgment of 5th of July, that was delivered very next day from the black money judgment in the Salwa Junoon case, that deals with this in great detail, how the poor are being exploited, their land is being taken away. For example, in this Odisha and Jharkhand, hundreds of MOUs were signed with overnight with Vedanta, POSCO and other such companies, Jindal, Tata, you name it, in Chhattisgarh also. So without any transparency, you give away huge tracts of land, there is no auction and there is no public benefit. So the Supreme Court has only said, and let me conclude with the Supreme Court, they said if you do decide to give it for private commercial exploitation, in certain cases you feel that the state should give up its right and the private operator should step in, then you have to do it transparently, you have to keep the public interest in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's very illuminating for me. So, I continue to feel as if I am, in a sense, in the minority, certainly of the activity here, because I continue to say or believe that to use the word auction is the only method by which maximum public benefit is secured. Unconditional public auction. I'm not so sure that I think there is something like a gamble about an auction. In other words, once you've auctioned it to the highest bidder, and he has a lot of money, he manages to show to you that he is qualified to some extent to exploit a particular national resource. And then you find after 1 year, 2 years, that the price which he really paid for it is way below. I mean, at an auction, he was the highest bidder. But the price he actually paid for it is way below the true consideration which is evolving of the particular natural resource. So as far as I can see, it is the evolution of the value of any national asset which has to be very carefully kept in mind, and any process, whether it's auction, whether it's negotiation, or bidding of any kind, has that to be very carefully taken into account. Anyway, I think I've made my point, and I will leave it there as far as what this happens. Yes, I'll just come to that. I'm going because this discussion is taking place in the context of the rule of law in our country. I just want to emphasize one or two aspects of this particular chapter, because otherwise I think we'll be left, and you're more or less also partly to provoke a discussion, because we will have some time on that. And that is that in this case, in particular, as you will have seen, so many licenses were actually cancelled, which are in existing, which had what we call vested rights actually already offered. In fact, that's what I had in mind. They were cancelled. Why were they cancelled? Because the judges came to the conclusion, the court came to the conclusion, that there was an impropriety involved in the decision-making process. Now we have a very important issue here, which is when you do business with government in any part of the world, you are entitled to assume that when a certificate or a license is signed by a minister, approved by a minister and signed by the secretary to the government of India, it is a document of value. You are not required to therefore go behind the document to see whether the decision was properly, fairly arrived at. It's the doctrine, as I'm sure many of you know, of presumed correctness of whatever is represented to the public, to the world, that this is the government of India document. Now, look what has happened here. After the cancellation of the licenses, you must have been reading the newspaper. There are now those people whose licenses were cancelled, some of them are foreign governments, are now going on to treaties, intergovernmental treaties, and using them to say, no, well, we were entitled to assume. I mean, you may have had a corrupt minister or a corrupt official, but as far as we are concerned, we didn't pay any bribes. There's no proof against us. Why should we suffer millions of dollars or pounds or worth of? So my point is, this is a principle which has been somehow, which is a well-established principle in Indian law and in international law, which has simply been abandoned. In other words, we have not really looked at that. Now what, I'll just give you one example. In 1960, whatever it was, when the Golaknath judgment came, the 6 judges to 5, the decision was that fundamental rights cannot be amended. But the court took and by then a large number of fundamental rights had already been amended, and lots of either money had been made or money had been lost because assets were taken over and so on. So the court was very careful to refer back to what was in those days, or still is, called the doctrine of validation, of prospective validation. Whatever has happened in the past, the government takes full responsibility for it and leaves it in. So, I mean, that has certainly been given the go by in this particular way. I won't say any more because now I find my colleague is already taking. I thought it was no, it's actually just asserting his own right under Article 19 of the Constitution of Free Speech. So may I ask Mr. Prashant Kumar to say something to us? I hope he will take up the challenge I just put out.
Thank you, Chairperson, for acceding to my request. See, yes, as a Republican democratic government, we have to, any certificate or this thing issued by the government has a sovereign backing behind it, and it ought to be respected and honored. But there is some gap here. Gap in the sense that pre-liberalization, before 90s, all the natural resources and natural monopolies were primarily in the hands of the government or the public sector. Now, what has historically happened? That we changed the policy, we brought in new policy structures, but they were all predicated upon certain assumptions. Certain assumptions is that a fair market competition is going to bring in the same checks and balances. The market, so-called market forces will prevail and they will bring in the same checks and balances which will make the resource utilization and allocation efficient and just. But what has happened, that lock, stock and barrel, we adopted a new policy framework, we ventured on the path of liberalization, but at the same time, the true market conditions were yet to emerge. So what was there? To fill that in, there were certain regulations to carry it out. Those regulations have been mostly a hit and miss method, an evolving framework. And there have been so many laws and others, regulations which were required to be adjusted to fit into the new framework. Those things did not happen. They did not take place. We could not even establish from the beginning when you are introducing market run mechanisms, and that will take 2 decades, 3 decades to stabilize for the market forces to come into work, like in the United States or other from where we have borrowed these models. In between, nobody gave mind to establish fair and transparent regulatory norms and structures. That is where the discretion became enormous, and also the scope for abusing discretion. That is where the crony capitalism has taken root. And when the court looks at it, that the crony capitalism has taken roots in such a manner in which the natural resources have just gone for a song, and just before your naked eyes, somebody buys a license for 600 crores and then sells it, part of it as a name of equity infusion and other things where you don't have anything else but that paper license and not even a business model in front of you. And that 600 thing, 40% or 45% of it is sold off for 4,500 crores or 5,000 crores. I think all these so-called assumptions of that, yes, a government contract, this thing, we can't have them sacrosanct any longer because the basis for those assumptions is no longer there. That's why it is the enormity perhaps of the entire thing which led the court to depart from the established norms and principles, because the departure from the fair and just way in which government should be conducting itself in distribution and allocation of natural resources never took place. It was so grossly arbitrary. So I think there has been some balancing. We just can't look at one side and stick to those principles. And each nation has to live through these transitions. Yes, in short run, people may look at it that yes, the government of India's sovereign stand or license given and all has no value. It can be called question, their business models can come down to zero or not. But in the long run, such kind of effective thing also says that yes, it is not a banana republic where anybody can go, spend some money and start doing business. So it's a message in the long run that we ought to do business in a fair manner in the long run should come to this country. And I think that's a good message. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prashant, which of course I'm so glad I'm able to provoke at least someone to either disagree or comment or what else and say. But I would just want to explain. My only point is this, that value-based resources are the ones you must have a control. For example, even now, look at the auction of 3G. 3G, we got certain, the government got the final amount of money, but it is never going to get out of 3G. But a lot of these people are going to make huge amounts of money in future also. My point is that we should cover what is still a growing asset, growing in value, and regulate it in a way in which you must, the public interest continues to be protected. That is my basic point. The other one, of course, where I say, all right, why cancel 22 licenses and not the whole lot of the licenses? Either that, or you protect what the other ones, what happened in the past, it's because of corruption on the part of a minister, let that government, that party suffer in the next election. Why should 22 fellows, that's their claim, that who took the license in good faith, why should they suffer? That's the basic thing. Politically, rule of law, from the point of view of the rule of law, we're changing the rules of law which apply. And when we do so, are we taking the right constitutional way in which to do that? That's all I'm saying. May I invite, because we still have about 10 minutes. Yes, please. President wants to say something.
A review. Review has been dismissed on several grounds, but there has been a notice on one particular ground. Now, what is the government's argument for recalling that, and why has the admission of why notice been issued? If you enlighten us on it.
To the extent that I am aware of it, governments has a different point of view apart from anything else.